Moving along here to Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South, our friend that joins us every Monday morning. Connor, we're getting you a little bit late. We had a lot of callers wanting to talk about Arkansas baseball falling to NC State in the Super Regionals. Obviously a huge bummer. And, overall, I guess, it wasn't a good day for the SEC yesterday. Mississippi State loses. Ole Miss gets knocked out. I'm sure Arkansas fans are celebrating that. But the Arkansas losing to NC State and not advancing to the College World Series, though people are calling it a shocking upset. I would say it is most definitely an upset. Well, what's your view from your vantage point?
I heard, the stat going into the College World Series about how it was like there's only been one top seed who's won it all in the last 20 years. And that just blew me away. But it kind of speaks to the parity within sport and some of the randomness of baseball. I mean, it just kind of comes with the territory, and it's just so unique to see a team go all the way through, regional, super regionals, go through Omaha. It seems more like a sport that's been built on a little bit of that unpredictability factor. And when you're, the top seed like Arkansas, it's obviously a bummer, and you hope to become the team to kind of go against that trend. But, I just think that's why college baseball is so different than, college football, where the best team in the sport, Alabama, hasn't lost to a team outside of the top 15 in over 10 years. I mean, it's just a very, very different dynamic at play there. But, yeah, I mean, I feel brutal for Arkansas fans experiencing that and feeling like this is a team capable of going all the way. And, those opportunities can be few and far between.
Well, and you deal with a tournament, too, which Alabama has never had to deal with, but now they might actually have to deal with that in a couple years or maybe in a year or so. And I guess this proposal is going to go through. I don't think it would get the light of day that it's got right now if it's not going to go through. So, I mean, this makes it more difficult to win a national championship, right, just by having an extra layer of playoffs. Does it really mean, though, that there are more teams that can win a national championship? The whole idea of the number one team losing to the number 13 team or something like that for Alabama, I still don't see it.
I agree. And I think that in college football, the cream rises to the top. I think that we've seen in a field that has been, you've been forced to play more games in the 14 playoff, right? Where a national champion is probably playing 15 games. There have been a few exceptions. 2017 Alabama didn't play for an SEC championship that only ended up having to play 14 games. For the most part, it's 15 games. So, you think about the way that it breaks down, and what are you more likely to see? Are you more likely to see a team catch fire late in the season and beat 5 consecutive top 15 teams? Because that's essentially what we'd be asking for in the 12-team playoff. You're going to have to face 5 consecutive top 15 teams if we're including a conference championship there. And a team is going to theoretically have to play 17 games to win a national championship. Or they could play 16 games if they get a first-round bye. I think the teams with a first-round bye still have a significant advantage. And I think that we're not necessarily going to see, an 8 seed win a national championship. There's a reason why the sport feels like it is a group of elites. And I don't think that's necessarily going to yield all of these surprising national championship winners. We might have the occasional upset. I'm not saying that can't happen. I expect it to. But to think that we're all of a sudden going to see the Wisconsin of the world win a national championship is just ludicrous to me.
I mean, the idea of 17 games, and there's only 2 teams that'll play that, but I understand your point, and I can understand where that's coming from too. And there's the other end of that is some folks are talking, well, we got to take a game away. Like, fat chance of ever taking a game away. That's like stuffing Pandora back in the box. It just doesn't work that way. They're never going to take another regular season game away from college football. That's too much money.
I agree. It's too much lost home revenue, and that's a big deal for these teams. And, for the teams that aren't necessarily in playoff contention who don't want to come out and admit that, but there are some Power 5 teams, like, let's be honest, that's just not in the cards. Arkansas could be one of those teams that's in the card, it's where it's a little bit more feasible maybe in a couple of years to where they can at least start having that conversation. But, for the Kansases, the Vanderbilts, the Oregon States of the world, you kind of look at this situation and say, well, would they theoretically take a home game away? Because that's significant. And that's something that schools like that really depend on. I mean, that's 7 figures worth of revenue right there to be able to have in your back pocket. They're talking about the reason that the expanded field looks like it's going to happen is to try and recoup some of this lost revenue from the year that was 2020 with reduced capacity crowds and all that stuff. And I just think that creates a very odd dynamic. But at the same time, if there are more Power 5 teams who feel like they have a chance of actually getting to the playoffs, then the idea that they're going to get rid of a game, they're not going to have that same sort of resistance. So I agree with you. It is like putting it back in Pandora's box. You only expand. You never reduce. Look at the way these professional sports organizations work. It's always about adding more games and not taking them away.
Connor O'Gara joining us here on Halftime. You can read Connor's work on SaturdayDownSouth.com, and you can check out his most recent post where he talks about former Arkansas wide receiver Mike Woods and your reference to your article about the top 5 transfers poised for success after leaving the SEC. Connor, what gives you confidence that Mike Woods will be able to find success in Oklahoma with a team that's going to have a slew of wide receivers to choose from?
Yeah, they have a lot of wide receiver talent. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Marvin Mims, especially, going to get preseason All-America love. And that's some of the frustration for Arkansas, right, of like why Mike Woods went to Oklahoma when you factor in Jason Hazelwood, the former number 1 receiver in his class, who's going to be draft eligible this year. You just look at all the talented options that they have. You're like, wait a minute, he's probably going to have less volume in that offense. But then you think about the dynamic of playing with Spencer Rattler, who we know with Lincoln Riley's offense is going to stretch the field. And the skill set that he brings to the table is still extremely valuable. And the ability to get behind some of these secondaries, that's going to play at Oklahoma. I mean, it just is. And then you add on the fact that they're going to add Eric Gray into that backfield as well. And Eric Gray, coming from Tennessee, I rank him number 1 on that list of the guys who are going to have the biggest impact in terms of the guys who left the SEC via the transfer portal. And I just think that offense is just really poised for some big things. And I wrote about why I think Oklahoma actually has its best team under Lincoln Riley, and Mike Woods is a part of that. And there's a very realistic chance that Arkansas fans will be looking up in late December, early January, and realizing, oh man, Mike Woods is playing for a team that could win a national championship and is making some big-time plays. I think that's a very realistic scenario this year.
And I completely agree with that. I think we'll definitely probably be seeing that as we get into the college football playoff and everything about that. But I'm curious from your standpoint, a lot of the fans, especially after the baseball loss yesterday, ready to start moving forward, getting to some summer workouts and getting in football mode several months out. You bring up we just brought up Mike Woods leaving for Oklahoma. Who do you think could step up or will step up to kind of, there's some good receivers in this Arkansas receiving core. Who could take up that number 2 spot in your mind right now?
I mean, it's got to be Trey Knox, right? Like that's he's the guy who, coming into last year, it just didn't feel like there was a ton of separation between Traylon Burks and Trey Knox, which now looking back is kind of a crazy thought with the directions that their careers went last year. But I saw some of the comments that he said and how he really just didn't have confidence last year. And that's a weird thing for a receiver, a skill player, to come out and admit. And I credit him for coming out and saying that. And if that's changed this year, which it appears it has based on the reports we've heard out of spring, I think he can be that guy. I'm not going to hold it against him that he wasn't able to really break away in Chad Morris's offense, knowing that Traylon Burks couldn't even do that. I think that that's a fair thing to be able to give a guy a pass for, but I think he's got to be the guy. He's the one who's got the talent. He's the one who's got the experience with being able to run routes against SEC defensive backs. And I think if you are trying to build an offense, trying to build that complementary piece for Traylon Burks, which a lot of SEC are in that spot where they're trying to find that number 2 guy to pair with a really solid number 1. I think Knox has to end up being that guy, and if he can, you're in a much better spot. I know they have some high expectations for Warren as well, but I think that Knox emerging is such a key piece to Arkansas taking that next step this year.
You are saying the things that everybody in Arkansas is just hoping for and kind of thought might happen last year too with Trey Knox, but it just didn't happen. Doesn't mean it won't happen now. Connor, appreciate you, man. Looking forward to digging a little heavier into football. To be quite honest here, I mean, as the baseball season has gone along, I've kind of not been paying too much attention to the pigskin, so I got to dig into it a little more now. Appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. We have plenty of football to talk about. We'll do it soon, guys.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. It's only like 6 weeks until the start of camp, right?
It'll be here before we know it.
That's what happens when the baseball season does go, to the middle of June. It's like, wow, I mean, our Razorback off season really is only going to last like 6 weeks. So get your vacations in while you can. 877-377-6963 for halftime. And we'll have Connor back next week. Jason Carroll will join us at 12:30. Until then, plenty of calls, plenty of texts, lots of those to get to. We have 3 up, 3 down in the second hour, and we've got a ridiculous story. Just a ridiculous story coming up next. Be careful if you're diving in New England.